Hello and welcome. I'm going to make this part of the barn into an enclosed and insulated workshop. A 5-acre property naturally has a fair bit of maintenance, and I really like to build and create. So I need a shop space for the work. But in the winter, the current space in the uninsulated barn can get too cold to get much done. So I'm going to close off half of the barn and insulate it so I have a warm space to work. Without a warm space, I won't get much done over the winter months. To get the barn ready for winter, I have to remove all the old boards from the walls, build a new wall with a door to split the barn in half, replace this small door with a proper exterior door, and close off the big barn door. I'm also going to add some electrical outlets to the shop space. There's currently only one breaker for all the outlets in the barn, and it's only 15 amps. And the breaker trips if I run the table saw and the shop vac at the same time. There are 2 new breakers with 4 outlets, and each of them rated for 20 amps. My current shop space is full of stuff, so I'm not going to be able to do the work all at once. I'm going to have to work in one section at a time. Ideally, I'd be able to pull off all the boards from the walls, then add insulation and vapor barrier, and then cover it with paneling. But since the shop is filled with stuff, I'm going to have to work on it one section at a time. This means moving everything out of one area and piling it somewhere else while I do the work. I'll do that in sections as I work my way around the barn. That means everything in the shop will have to be picked up and moved several times. It's going to be a lot of work, but in the end, it'll be worth it to have an enclosed workspace. I'm starting in this corner. I've got it all cleared out and I've pulled some of the boards off the wall. This is the border to the shop, so I'll have to build a new wall here. The floor is not level here, so each of the 2x4s end up being a little bit different. I've covered the bottom 2x4 with plastic because wood should not sit directly on concrete or it's likely to rot. Once the 2x4s are in, I start running the electrical wiring through the wall. One circuit will be for this side of the barn, and the other circuit will be for the other side. I'm placing all the outlets around waist level for easier access. I don't want to be reaching behind things to plug something in. With the electrical in, I started adding the rock wool insulation. I went with rock wool because it resists moisture better than the pink insulation, and it's apparently more resistant to pests. I've seen a few rats nest in the pink insulation that was in the pantry, so it'd be nice if fewer rats were living in the walls. Another major benefit of the rock wool is fire resistance. It can withstand higher temperatures and help reduce the spread of fire. Hopefully, I'll never need that, but it's nice to know it's there if it's needed. After the rock wool is in, I cover it with some 6mm poly vapor barrier. I found a nice trick for cutting the poly. I use this hook blade and the underside of my saw guide to get a nice square edge on the poly. With the poly up, now I add the panels. The panels are called Bintinger. I've never heard of it till recently, not even sure if that's how you pronounce it, but I chose it because the price was right. It's very thin and has a tendency to warp. But once it's all stapled down, you won't notice the warps. So far, I'm okay with the color of it, but once all the walls are done, I'll decide if I want to keep it as is, or maybe paint it. Let me know what you think of the look of this stuff in the comments below. To cut the paneling, I've put a couple of thin sheets of styrofoam insulation on my assembly table, so I can place the panel on that. Then I set my skill saw depth to just go through the boards and slightly into the styrofoam. This helps to support the paneling. Since it's so thin, I still need to use some weight to hold down the saw guide. In order to get this all done before it gets too cold, I'm going to have to do the edge trim later. Once all the walls are closed off and I have an insulated space, I'll go back and add some trim around the walls to make it look a little better. I plan to use some of the wood that's being pulled off of the walls for the edge trim. I'm not sure what type of wood this is. Some of it's in pretty rough shape. Apparently, not all the horses were happy about being in their stalls, and they were trying to kick their way out. My process for removing the boards is to pull them off and clean them off with the shop vac. Some of them are covered in webs, dust, dirt, and even straw from the old stalls. Once I vacuum them off, I pull all the nails and then pile them up over by the stairs. These will all be stored in the loft until I need them. I did want to see what this wood would look like, all cleaned up, so I washed one, made sure there were no nails in it, then ran it through the planer. The wood is 1.5 inches thick. I ended up planing this one down to 1 inch thick. The wood looks great. If anyone thinks they know what kind of wood this is, please feel free to comment below. Some of the other wood that I've pulled off of the barn has a stamp on it that says it's Douglas fir, so this stuff might be as well, but I've not seen any stamp on any of these boards. Now that I have the corner more or less done, I can start moving stuff out of the way for the next part. This part of the wall seems to have taken the worst abuse from the horses, and at some point someone's just added a second layer of boards. So there's a lot to remove from this area, and the mess behind these boards was pretty gross, including an old abandoned wasp's nest, and a couple of rats' nests, and a lot of spiders. The process is the same for this wall. Pull off the boards, clean it all out, run the wiring through, then insulation, put up the vapor barrier, and attach the panels. There are 2 windows on this wall, and they're nothing more than sheets of plexiglass, so eventually they'll have to go. But for now, I've not been able to locate anything to replace them, so they're gonna have to wait till later. While adding the paneling, I realized the panels were not always gonna end up on studs, so I used a couple of thin wood scraps between the panels so that I'd have something to staple to hold them level with each other. Without those, the seams don't line up and you end up being able to see it. The first few panels went in quick and easy, but then I started needing to make cuts for the windows and the outlets. With some careful measuring and cutting, I managed to get all the panels on this wall. At least as far as I could go before I had to stop and move everything off this shelf. Once empty, I moved the shelf over to the other side that I had already completed, and then put everything back on the shelf. I think by the time I'm done, I'll have moved everything in this entire shop at least 3 or 4 times. But the benefit of this is that I can take a bit of an inventory and see what I have in here. I'm finding things that were stuffed in a drawer years ago and I'd forgotten about. I should be able to get rid of anything that's useless, and once the insulation is all done, I'll be able to organize everything a little better so nothing will be forgotten in a drawer ever again, hopefully. Now I can work on replacing this door with a proper exterior door. I mentioned before that the floor of the barn is sloped for drainage. Well, that presents a challenge for this door. The slab that the door will sit on is not level, and there's not a lot of clearance for the door to fit into the space. So I had to come up with a way to make a thin wedge out of a 2x4. I ended up resawing this length of 2x4 by hand with the Japanese pull saw. Is there anything this saw can't do? With the bottom of the door taken care of, now I have to add a bit of framing because my door opening is a little bigger than my door. The walls here are also not square or level, so I end up with the odd shape beside the door. I think the builders of this barn could have used one of these. There are more examples of not square carpentry in this barn. My little door is in and the rest of the wall is done. Now to tackle the big barn door. This door was not designed to keep the elements out, and we never use it, so I'm going to wall it up. From the outside it'll look the same, but inside it'll be like it was never there. I can't remember the last time this door was open. It's been so long that the dirt and the grass have filled in the door's path, so I have to get out the shovel and dig just to get the door open. And now that I've opened it, I can get ready to frame the wall. First, some of these boards have to come off. This door, much like the other one, is not square, so I'll end up with some odd 2x4 spacing on my wall. This wall is held together with screws, and there's no electrical in it, so if I ever decide that I'd rather have a door here, I can pull it all out pretty quickly. The outer part of this wall gets some plywood over it, and then we can close these doors forever. Once closed, I screw the doors in place. They are now just decoration. The last step is to insulate, cover with vapor barrier, and then add panels. And now the door is a wall. I'm also insulating the ceiling, but I'm not putting any panels on it yet. I'll leave that till later. I'll have to decide what to do about covering it up. I'm pretty sure I don't want to use the same paneling that's on the walls. That might be too much Bintinger. And that's where I'm at for now. Part 2 will be tackling the other side of the shop. This side could be a lot more work. there's a lot more stuff to move around. But I'll work away and get it done as soon as I can, hopefully before it starts getting really cold. I hope you're enjoying the barn series so far. If you are, please give the video a like, and feel free to comment below. It'll really help the channel. And please subscribe as well to see more of the work I'm doing around the barn and the farm. I have some big plans for this place, so stick around and follow along with the changes.